All right, let's get started then. I apologize for not being here last time. As we were talking a little bit earlier, I got caught with one of the limitations of the technology in that my internet went out about an hour before the meeting last time. And then Dennis said, well, you should use a cell phone, but we have no cell coverage here either. So it really kind of left me high and dry, and unfortunately, I had to delegate John to deal with it. So anyway, I hope we get through this. We're going to try real hard to limit individual presentations to 10-15 minutes apiece and see that everyone gets a voice and have lots of time for questions. And if that doesn't work, I don't know what else I'll try, but I think that's where we're going to aim. So, but I'm going to hold you to yours. So John is going to start, and we'll hold his to his 10 to 15 minute presentation here. We'll just give the spotlight.
I think I'll be able to do it quicker than that. Well, you take the spotlight off me, actually, because the first thing I want to do is introduce a practice that I've taken up in all my meetings. I'm back in gallery view, and I invite you all to go to gallery view as well in order to have a good look at who's on here tonight. And in a hybrid meeting, what I do is I also show the Zoom to the room and the room to the Zoom, and ask them just to, the first thing my wife asked me when I come home from a meeting is, well, who was there? Well, that's the social aspect of it. Who was there? So it does us good to acknowledge that and get us out of the the TV watching and realize we are dealing with our friends and colleagues, and we're all here on screen together. That's another. I have a couple of things I want to talk about after here's looking at you. Bruce alluded to last month. Last month I was left with doing it myself because Bruce and Jim were both off. They're my usual co-hosts because of lightning storm. I had Dennis on, and Dennis is perfectly capable of being co-host as well. But I sort of arrogantly said, "Oh, I can handle this." Well, I can't handle this. I can handle a coffee hour of 30 or 40 people because they're all trained to use raise hand and they're used to taking turns. But you lot, everybody wants to talk at once and nobody wants to stop talking. And it's very hard to manage the screen and manage the Zoom and manage the meeting all at the same time. So you got to have co-hosts. And right now there are 3 co-hosts with us here tonight for that very reason. And so after the fail last month of relying on the co-host to help with the meeting, at our club meeting, I had terrible audio problems, and the co-hosts were who saved my butt. They sent me texts. I couldn't get the batteries died, and what I was using to monitor audio was a hybrid club meeting, and I got texts all through the meeting from Jim and from Bruce who said, your audio's too low, or this audio's volume's way too high, and they just flash on my screen, and I can respond to those. And similarly, if we get a thunderstorm here tonight and I get knocked off as the meeting host, the host duties will devolve to one of the co-hosts as opposed to some random member. So it's a very important, good practice to have an off-site co-host for every meeting, someone who can both take over for you and step in with you and help control the unruly mob. Can't emphasize that strongly enough. The times when we have not done it have been fails, and the times when we have been successes. Because of this forum earlier in the spring, we realized we have 2 kinds of club leaders. We have club leaders who are into the tech and they're good at it and they got no problem figuring it out and working through it. But we also have non-tech club leaders who say things to us like, well, what's the simplest Zoom setup and how do I learn this? And I got enough of that this spring so that I made a 10 video. I set out to make 1 video and it turned into 10 short videos on different topics, which are all posted on the AAW site that I mean as tutorials for non-tech club leaders who have to step into this. I know that all you guys who are tech experts will consider them silly, and I don't care. Because what I'm after is establishing a way for club leaders to learn how to do this. And I believe the way to do it is to set up a simple 1-camera setup and a simple 1-camera Zoom setup and play with it. And if you do that, you can learn this and conquer it. And if you don't do that, it'll remain an opaque mystery till the end of time. So I will send in the chat from this a link to the playlists where those videos are. I have also created playlists on my channel for the past club presentations from this forum and also for the past open forum. So all those videos are both available on the AAW chapter leadership forum, and they're organized in playlists on my own YouTube channel. And I'll put out all that information in the next follow-up email. Part of the reason, okay, why did we do this? Well, I frankly got tired of waiting for the AA board to do anything. The board has been silent on this whole point. Baker recently told me that the board had decided to form an AV committee, and he's tasked with doing that. And I'm very glad to see that begin to happen, because there's a lot of functions here that we're trying to do as a group of club leaders that really belong with the board. Keeping of the records, keeping of the archive, keeping of the mailing list, developing best practices, developing tutorials and teaching materials. This really is all a board function. And that leads me to the last point I want to make. Well, I have two other points I want to make. One of the last points I want to make is in pushing on this whole problem, we have persuaded the Mid-Atlantic Symposium to enable a hybrid component, and the Lancaster Coffee Hour group is going to do that. We're going to try and go to the Mid-Atlantic Symposium and deliver 5-6 hours of Zoom that does not include demos. Nobody wants to allow the demos to go out on the Zoom. They're afraid that people won't attend the event, and I get that. But I think there's a lot in the event that we can do on Zoom. We're going to do the vendors, we're going to do the trade show, we're going to do the opening reception and intros, and we're going to do the luncheon. We'll have a team of about 4 people with a mobile Zoom cart around the event, and I will have more to say about that, more to show you about that in coming weeks or coming months. But I think it's going to be a breakthrough. What we're hoping to do is establish a bit of a paradigm of, here's a way you can do it. It doesn't mean it's the only way, but it's a way that works to enable a hybrid component for regional events and national events. The reason for that, of course, is everybody wants to be there and do the demos if you can, see the demos and see everything if you can. But sometimes you just can't for whatever reason. It might be health, it might be other commitments, it might be it's too expensive, it's too far, all kinds of reasons. So we've come to believe that there's a whole audience that AAW events have not been reaching, of people who would like to be there, will enjoy a Zoom participation at a lower price, recognizing that it's not a substitute for being there. It's something new that we're going to try and create. And a way it can become a way of involving more people. That brings me to the final part of this. One of our club members asked me this morning, are any of these guys running for the board that we should pay attention to? And I said, I don't know. And so I went and read all the six bios that are out there on the AAW site. I noticed that one, Sally Burnett, has LIRD experience and wrote to that, but none of the other 5 mentioned anything about hybrid meetings. So I wrote to them and I said, hey, what about it? And I posed 4 questions to them. Invited them to come on here for a minute or 2 and to give us written answers to the questions if they'd like to. And 2 did give me written answers, which I'll also circulate. And 1 is here. He's been a regular on this forum. And since he's here and since he's been paying attention, I would go for giving him a couple of minutes to tell us what he thinks about hybrid meetings and what the board ought to be doing. Ron, you want to go for it?
Sure. And thanks for the opportunity. And absolutely don't want this to be a campaign speech or anything like that. But
we don't want that.
Yeah. Basically, my philosophy with this hybrid meeting in the national symposium is they got to figure out a way to create enough value at the on-site to get everybody there. But if they can't be there, I look at the worldwide Woodturners hybrid they had last year, or their online they had last year, which was a phenomenal success. Why can't the AAW embrace that and do both, have the live in person as well as the hybrid? Because absolutely, you don't know about the health issues that somebody may have, but more importantly, the cost. It's getting very, very expensive to go to a national symposium or even the regional ones. So to embrace that, the AAW ought to be taking the lead on this. Without a doubt.
So if you get on the board, you'll be an advocate for hybrid meetings, will you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I like is the idea that you can share sister clubs. We could have a meeting here in North Dakota and share it with somebody clear down there in Florida in the middle of winter and show them what snow really looks like. But at the same time, we can take advantage of some of the demonstrators and just getting some of that cross-fertilization that we just don't have right now. And to me, this forum is a great way to do that. And the hybrid meetings there. You asked the question, have we done hybrid meetings? Absolutely. We did them out in my shop, obviously, during COVID. Up here in North Dakota, we didn't have a strict lockdown. So we kind of started out as a hybrid. We had a lot of members that would come to my shop. At the same time, we'd be putting it out on Zoom. Very simplistic, not a lot of high tech. You know, as we found trying to
So,
go with high tech
so,
and Zoom and all that, the audio
so if
is a
you're,
big challenge.
so if you're on the board, you're going to be a voice for supporting clubs who want to have hybrid meetings. Am I hearing you right?
Yes,
That's what we wanted to
absolutely.
hear.
See, Rick Baker has a hand up. You want to say something, Rick?
Well, just before we go to Rick, is there anybody else who's a board candidate on the screen right now? We should give them a minute or two if they're here. There was another fellow who said he might show, and I'm not sure if he is. I don't know these guys, so okay, I don't see anybody saying they're that other person. Okay, Baker.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, and I'm glad to hear that Ron's supporting us with the online stuff. Our biggest problem for the board is getting people that'll volunteer to do this. That's our big limiting factor, is that the number of people that it takes to do an online. And each room that we do requires 3 or 4 people. And we have a hard time getting a single videographer in there for live events. So anybody that's interested in that, get in touch with me, because it's so important that we get those people. That'll stop us from doing it if we can't get the people.
Oh, so Rick, what's the progress towards forming your committee?
I've got a board meeting this week to finalize it.
Have you got a mission statement worked out?
We have something worked out, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Rick about this topic?
All right.
I want to thank you, Rick, also for your support in the Mid-Atlantic Initiative. We actually did a Zoom test at the convention center last week with my mobile Zoom cart and Rick and Jim Bowman and Doug Reeser and my wife. And we established that we can establish a hotspot and establish a Zoom link from all of the meeting spaces at the Marriott that is stable and seems to be very stable, workable. So technically we can do this. Now are we smart enough to pull it off?
All right, our next presentation is from Alan from our club. And I want to say that Alan is the guy who actually made it all happen for us and dragged this club president down that road. So it's kind of nice for me to have him talk tonight. So Alan, I'm going to spotlight you and you can share. Well, I guess I already beaten to that punch. Okay.
Well, and I would say that, you know, John, you were categorizing people into kind of 2 categories of not knowing and being a technical expert. And you actually have the other one, which is that they're technically curious. They're willing to learn, they want to know. And then there are those that say, I don't want to know, I don't want to be part of this, or I'm forced into this, but I don't like it. And Bruce was definitely in this category of, I'm willing to learn this and I'm willing to step up to the point where if we have a disaster and I'm not available, Bruce runs it and he's able to go and do things. And I'll start off with showing our kind of our environment and sort of the processes and techniques that we've tended towards, and I'll give you just a quick view of some of the configuration changes that we've gone through. You know, this I have a background in audio-visual, and I've done some sound work. This is not our setup.
I hope not.
This is an event that I did with my company, where I was employing a professional AV group that we were at the the Washington Convention Center, and so thinking in terms of the way cables are laid out and the way things are thrown together, or that you know, may or may not think that things are professional. This is a common thing, to have cables scattered, to have things laid out as in terms of what's going on. You'll see that in our slides. We've gotten the configuration working first, and then we're working on optimizing it and cleaning it up. And every single time we do it, it gets set up faster, and we have more neatness and other types of things. Our club started out where we were live in-house. We had a projection screen and a single camera, and we used that for giving views on a fairly dim front-end screen. We upgraded to TVs, and we had an additional camera that was a very cheap, it's a very, very inexpensive action camera. And we then started towards the path of figuring out additional camera views when COVID hit, and we went completely remote. So we stayed remote until towards the March timeframe of this year, and we did a demonstration. We made the plans for having a demonstration with an individual who would come in, but the audience would continue to stay remote. So in some ways, we were doing an IRD with our facility, but getting everything mapped out and tested. So our configuration is a fairly standard setup. We use 3 screens that are projecting the exact same thing. We have 2 Zoom screens, and we have a presenter monitor that is being turned around and being shown to the demonstrator at the lathe. And all 3 of those are the same signal. They are all showing the Zoom view, which gives a view of the audience and a reflection of the participant or the demonstrator.
Alan, that GoPro camera, I didn't realize GoPros would put out HDMI.
So I'll get to that. That's a really good question. So there are some configurations, and I actually spent time talking with Trent Bosch about that, and figured out what the configuration that he was using in order to do that. So we have effectively 3 live cameras that are all putting out HDMI. And then we have a 4th connection, which is often going to be a desktop computer. So this was the design configuration that we played around with the group before we decided to go out to buy everything. We were upgrading a lot of the equipment that we had. Many of the equipment pieces that we bought just before COVID were effectively technically obsolete by the 2 years later that we were moving towards the hybrid environment. So we did decide to go with the Atem Mini Pro. We went towards the possibilities that it gave us the most number of options in the future. We can still do webcam and HDMI or USB switching if we want to, and we actually have a little bit of a variation that we use on that. So this was the design that we did that was conceptual, that I used this for the board meeting to show everybody what was going on. And that evolved into our wiring diagram that actually is what we use to have our things connected when we assemble things on the demonstration days. This is a very dense page. It's not really made to be viewed this way. It's made to be printed on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. When we get to the point where it's stabilized, we will probably even laminate it and stick it to some of the pieces so that people who are not familiar with the setup can see the wiring, see the labels that are on the cables. We do label everything that we can, and we walk through and can assemble everything on the day of the demonstration. I should say that. So in our venue, in the past, we have taken 2.5 hours to set up. We are down to, Bruce, what are we, about 35 minutes?
No, I would say it takes us a little more than an hour to get it set up now.
Okay, and the general configuration is that we have storage areas that several hundred feet away through a couple of hallways and doorways that we have to move things. So we're unpacking a very dense storage area that is very much a furniture puzzle, and we're pulling out things and then having to assemble them. Our boom camera, that's actually of Rick Baker's design, is one of the more difficult things to store because of the size of it. It fits into our storage cubicle area diagonally, but we disconnect it from the base that's there. So on our first day, we did our demonstration where Mark Supik, who is a professional turner from Baltimore City and is a long and loyal club member, he did a demonstration, and it was actually his first remote demo. He had not done a web demo environment and was not really keen on going without the audience. That was where it was really essential. Having that presenter monitor in front of him gave him a chance to see what the audience was reacting to and how they were, when they asked a question, he could hear the audio from them during his turning. So there are certainly hazards in having your cameras out in the space. We had our our boom camera decorated with all sorts of green wood turnings that were streamed all over the place. When we then moved to hybrid meetings, there were a couple of things that we determined that were going to be essential. One is we were going to have a remote moderator. That's me. I'm immune compromised. And so I go in with a mask. I work with the team on setting things up, and I help here with any technical issues, and we work through the problems. And then I leave and I go home. And then I moderate from for the remote side while Bruce is actually doing all the camera switching and the audio work and everything else. And he's done a spectacular job for somebody who purported to be a brand new beginner on that.
Well, no, wait a minute. In that setup, you can each work the host controls, right?
We do not. We can work the Zoom host controls. That's correct.
But you can't work the PC controls remotely.
That's right. There are some options and possibilities that I could do in which we might, have remote control of the keyboards and such like that. But I think if we got to the point where either there was an issue where Bruce was incapacitated, or we did not have remote connection, then we're going to kind of back away from the possibility of having the hybrid being a rich experience for both remote and online people, or remote and local people. So our typical setup is that we have effectively 3 cameras that can give us a variety of views. In this view, we've got the boom camera that can give us both the overhead and the 3/4 view, or even end-on view, that those top 2 are being shown. The top right camera is actually our GoPro, and it is on a flexible stalk on a stand that's weighted so that we can move it around and we can adjust it to different locations. This past week, we actually changed the frame rate on it, so it's now running as a 2K 60K, sorry, 2K 60 frame rate camera view, and we've gotten much better quality image out of that. The bottom right is a tripod that is in the audience. And in the case of when we're turning a bowl, we tend to put up a plexiglass panel because the audience is fairly close to the demonstrator. So this is a modification for Rick Baker's camera boom. We have made some changes in order to make it a little bit more lightweight. We just recently changed out the hinge mechanism so that it's actually using some gliding hinges, or they're a smooth bearing oil bearing system that's made for cameras, and it gives us a much cleaner ability to be able to slide the camera around and to be able to raise and lower as necessary. We're also making some adjustments where we're going to be changing. The remote is normally down on the tripod itself. We've modified that so that we're putting the remote up onto the back pipe so that the individual can stand a little bit further away and can really boom that, put the boom in close to the demonstrator.
Cool.
And we actually are using a heavy duty surveyor's tripod for the base, and we've upgraded the casters on that to be a larger diameter so they can roll over top of chips, and as you can see, some of our demonstrators can get quite lively. Mark Supik is famous for being able to aim his streamers, and he was working pretty hard at getting a spectacular coverage, and this was quite effective. So
Nice.
So our environment is that we're in a small rectangular room in the basement of a Shriner's temple that they rent us space. So it is a tiled floor, it's a square room, and our demonstrators are pretty close to our audience members. So one of the things that we found early on, and it was actually think through this forum, that Bruce now engages, and I've simulated here that we actually have a telephone, a cell phone that's running Zoom as an additional participant, and it is then showing the audience. So people, if they want to, they can pin the audience as well as the demonstrator and be able to see what's going on to the crowd, as well as to the main demonstration view that we're sending to everybody.
Bruce got that from our club, and we think that's critical. Right. That's what enables the social communication, is to have that view of the room and the view of the Zoom.
Yep. And very early on, when I was watching your YouTube channels of views and different demonstration configurations that you were going for, that was something that I thought was very engaging for connecting the remote hybrid audience with the online or the local crowd.
There's a 3-minute video about that as part of the hybrid series, the tutorial series on different zooms, all of the different ways you can look through the cameras and connect people.
That's right.
Culminating in multiple spotlights, which is, to me, the best way to go.
So we went from a configuration where we had this inexpensive GoPro camera that could output HDMI. Its frame rate was not very good. It did have some issues with color registration where we had some things that just weren't quite there, but it was good for us to perfect our craft. I don't know, it was like a $40 camera or something. And if we get to the point of where we're going to have an additional camera where we want something in a risky environment, we'll throw that camera in there, because if it gets whacked, then we can replace it for almost nothing. The main GoPro camera that we have is a different configuration. So we have a flexible mount. We have a mag switch so that we can change it and mount it to different places, but we have it on a small music stand that's weighted at the bottom. It gives us the ability to be able to put it in a couple of different configurations. This was our 2nd generation camera. And then finally,
before you move on, you should that was our show and tell kind of environment here, where you bring your piece up and stick it on the X, and that camera captures it very nicely. But go ahead.
Yep. And we were in good shape until somebody moved the X.
Yeah, well, that's
So the next configuration that we did was that we got a GoPro Hero 8, and there is what's called a media adapter, and that allows you to connect the GoPro Hero that has a collar that goes around it, and it provides the output of an HDMI signal and having your power connector coming out the back of the camera. This allows you to be able to shove the camera and point it directly at whatever it is you're going to be viewing. And this was the configuration that Trent Bosch used, and he got that from Alan Zenreich's early configurations, where Alan had helped Trent figure out a number of different things. So this configuration is worthwhile and it's useful. However, this media adapter is not always of the best quality from out of the gate. It very often can suffer infant death. It'll die within the first 20 minutes of use, and you have to send it back, and then they send you a replacement. And then if it works past that first 20 minutes, you're good. It's going to work for years. So we did have that issue, and we did have to send it back under warranty, and we got a replacement right away.
So do you find the GoPro a better camera for you than, for example, a Brio?
It is, because for us, the ability to be able to take that higher frame rate, and more importantly, we're looking at the clarity of the image under the same kind of lighting that the rest of the cameras are doing. And in our case, because it's enclosed in this case and it's a GoPro, we're also a little bit less worried about needing to put it behind a plexiglass panel or something else that's going to smack it, including chisels. So for us, looking at the concept of having an action camera that can get in potentially very close, and to have that focus range that we could potentially get into where we're looking at, within inches of the piece that's being worked on.
Is that focus range on the camera controls, or is it on your screen?
No, it's just because the camera's lens system is capable of doing that. So we don't typically run any of the camera controls during the demonstration. We do fire and forget.
Good.
So we set up the camera and we leave it simple.
Yeah, I agree.
We wrap in about 5 minutes or less, Alan.
Yeah, well, I'm going to field questions. So
yes.
here's one of our tips. GoPros don't like long HDMI cables. There is a difficulty of being able to get the voltage to push it that distance. Here's our trick. Use an HDMI splitter, a 1 to 2 splitter, and don't connect a second monitor to it, but connect the other end to your Atem Mini.
That's a plug-in splitter. That's got to be a plug-in splitter to do that.
A plug-in splitter, that's correct, not a passive.
That amplifies the signal.
And that's right. It'll act as a signal booster. It'll also synchronize the signal. It also gives you the capability of being able to send it a much longer distance. And potentially, if you're using a fiber-based HDMI cable, it'll give power to both ends of it so that it can get that signal across the room over to your Atem. We found a fairly significant improvement on reliability by having it plugged into the splitter. And, you know, we could buy an HDMI booster, but for our situation, having this splitter on available for us gives us some flexibility for other configurations if we decide to ever do that. Next, we've got a presenter monitor. And in the past, we tried out putting it on rollers. It just wasn't worth it. So I've replaced that with a stable stand. And that stand, which was originally a room fan, has the capability of going from being about 2 feet high up to about 4.5 feet high. So it'll give the presenter a number of different views that they can work with to see themselves. And sometimes it's called a vanity monitor that gives them the ability to see which camera is being used or what perspective, or if they're holding something and whether they're in camera or out, or, you know, when they're wanting to address the online crowd as to which camera to look into. So this is our control station. This is where Bruce sits. His Mac is on the right. We have that plugged in as one of the camera sources. And we use that primarily for being able to show slides or videos, or if we're doing a remote demonstration, they may come in through that system, possibly. But the other 3 cameras are defined so that we have our front of house camera going into 1, our boom camera is into 2, and Gopro is into 3. And that gives us that normal sequence. There's also something special with the Atem Mini, which is that if you have, if you're wanting to do picture in a picture, it will by nature and by default will pick camera 1 for the picture in a picture using the buttons. We have not gotten into doing macros where people have done things like made the picture in a picture bigger, or to be able to do split screens with 50-50 splits. We know that's possible. We're not there yet. That's our next level of evolution.
Steve Criscenzo later in this meeting is going to give us a real good workout on the Atem. That's
fantastic.
That's the
I'll be taking notes.
Yeah, I will too.
So our main configuration, and I'll show it here, is that we have a Dell outlet desktop that has 2 display ports and 1 HDMI output. We take the display port output and we convert that into HDMI and send that to the front of the room. So that PC thinks it has 2 monitors, one above the other. The one that's lower is the one that's on this table that normally is used for seeing the Zoom controls, the Atem controls, or any other kinds of chat windows that Bruce might use. And then he puts the Zoom window up on the big display, and that gets shown on 3 big monitors. The monitor to the right, or in the middle of this case, in between the laptop and the second monitor, that's showing the output from the Atem, and that Atem view is giving us what's called multi-view, in which we can see all of the cameras and the microphone outputs and any other kind of graphic signals or things that we're putting there.
And that's the software that comes with the Atem from Blackmagic Designs.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So very, very important. We do this. We label things. We have the cables. The cables are labeled on both ends. The ports in which they're getting plugged into are labeled, and the switches that are getting triggered are labeled. We have found that by doing that, it allows us to have more volunteers. More people are willing to help with that without having to have the tribal knowledge or the verbal heritage to understand how to get things plugged in. And it means that I can be concentrating on enhancing something or fixing something while other people are doing the generic regular setup about what's happening.
Very good.
So
very good.
I cannot emphasize enough that a label maker will save you hours in setup and teardown.
You're absolutely right about that.
Certainly from lessons learned, the thing that we recognized and realized in our club space, we only have really 2 circuits that are available to us. One of them we want to plug the lathe in, and the other one we plug in all of the AV equipment. You don't tend to want to plug into 2 separate circuits for your AV materials, because if there's any kind of difference in the voltage or a difference in the circuits between those, the path in which those 2 are going to equalize each other is through your AV equipment. And that can cause a hum, or it can cause a destruction of your electronics.
Or rolling screen as well.
That's true. Yeah. So we will take we have a number of different plugs that we will pull one extension cord from the wall, and we'll get it in as much as we can in terms of running things from that one location. And we are currently running with both of our TVs, all the monitors, the equipment, and the PC. We're still well under what that circuit's going to be able to support. So last and most important for us is that we bring in our own Wi-Fi setup, so that we do have a hardwired connection into the building's Ethernet, and they have broadband, so we're able to use that setup. We then we do have local Wi-Fi for the building, and we let any of the regular club members use that, but we have our own private Wi-Fi if we ever need to have devices that are part of the internal network. But the key piece to this is that the PC, the Atem Mini, and any other kind of devices or cameras are all plugged into this router, so that they are running as a local network. That means that the PC can talk to the Atem, not just through the USB cable, but also through the internet, and be able to do connections and drive any of the data that way. Lastly, for us, lessons learned that we got was that we need to document the wiring and what the placement is going to be, how things are located. We're getting better about taking pictures, and we're trying to get better about how the labeling and how the configurations are set up. We're trying to make it so that there's less necessary thinking and trying to derive something as to where it's supposed to be, as opposed to knowing or doing it from practice. Label your cables and connections. Here's the other thing: using a local host and a remote co-host. Cannot emphasize it enough. In the case of power outages, there's also the situation of where the people online may not want to stick around to wait for the reconnection. That remote host can actually start up a conversation, and it can be other things that are ready. We also have the possibility of being able to invoke a club video that we could show and have a conversation with while we're waiting for the main building to come back online. The other one for us, the GoPro camera, if you've got a long HDMI cable, use a splitter or a booster. That will eliminate a lot of issues with dealing with these action cameras that have difficult HDMI communications that's there. Also, this group has taught us about using original sound. We've had a very strange setup of where somebody's doing turning, and when they start turning, everything goes silent. And it's because Zoom is saying, wow, there's a whole lot of background noise. I'm going to do noise suppression, and I'm going to knock it down. And it's eerie, because then when somebody starts talking, it's like they're talking to an empty room, and it disconnects you from that experience of the show. And then lastly, plan for your power. We do not have enough power plugs, or if we don't have enough extension cords or breakout boxes, power is not going to be in the right places. As you can see from our original diagram, we have a lot of power plugs that we're using.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it from the Bat Cave. And
questions, comments, questions for
lots
Alan.
of questions. Dennis.
A simple question. The output we're looking at, the wiring diagram, what software did you create that diagram in?
Oh, I did this in PowerPoint.
Okay.
So you can also do it in Visio, and there's a number of other pieces, but believe it or not, I did the entire thing in PowerPoint. And then I Googled online for images of the various kinds of connectors. So these, I don't know if I can actually zoom in on I can zoom in on the images. These cables are actually faithful to the kind of port that's there. So you can actually see that something is a power plug, versus an HDMI cable versus a USB cable. And I did that
Alan,
just
that
purely
is
by,
really good.
yeah. And I'd be happy to send out this image that's got all these different cut and paste pieces that you could use to maneuver around. I'll send this. Actually, Bruce has a copy of this. He can get it to John. You guys can. You're more than happy, more than welcome to use that that screenshot.
We will do
Steve.
that.
Can you kill that share, Alan?
Sure can.
I'll kill the share. You guys go on and talk. Steve, go for it. I'll kill the share here.
Alan, are you trying to amplify the audio for the on-site audience?
We tend not to use a lot of amplification because our room doesn't need it. We do have the capability of doing that in that the TV speakers could do some boosting if we wanted to, but we really tend to just use the speakers in the room for being able to amplify either slideshows or videos that might be coming in or the remote attendees.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Eric Brown?
Yeah, you were talking about long HDMI cables, and I was wondering, what do you consider a long cable before you had to boost it? I think our longest one is like 25 feet. And,
we have a couple of 30 footers. They are fiber based, so they're ones that we got from Monoprice, and they are specifically designed to be powered on both ends, and they have a fiber optic signal cable that's going in between. It's a great reason for that as well, in that cables that are that long also would not get any magnetic interference that might disrupt it. And if we're running it past the lathe motors or other kinds of signals that might have RF interference, these fiber-based HDMI cables can really run quite the distance. The key is they have to be powered by a device that understands how to put the voltage into the signal so that fiber cable is powered on both ends, because it's basically a sender and a transmitter and a light beam that goes in between.
You could
But
maybe
we have 30-foot HDMI cables.
So maybe you could give us the spec on that and we'll put it out as part of the follow-up.
Sure can.
Okay.
Rick, you have a question?
Alan, I'd like you to send me your pictures of your modifications to the boom. I mean, I did this thing all by myself, and willing to look at anything you guys come up with. I really appreciate seeing it.
Yeah.
Also,
we did some dumpster diving and scrounging for some of the parts that.
Well, how do you think I did it? One of the things is for pushing HDMI cables. I ran into this Rockfish splitter, double splitter. It's from Best Buy. And it pushes far. I'm looking at a monitor over here that has 75 feet of cable on it, and I've actually pushed it over 100 very dependably. So it's something to look into. I mean, this is the box where I was trying to take the label off of it. But
and Rockfish is one of Best Buy's generic brands that they're one of Best Buy's suppliers, and they have a whole bunch of different things that they do, that everything from generic power supplies and other sorts of replacements that are there.
Michael Linsky?
Hi, thanks. Could you talk me through how you do your audio into the Atem?
Oh, actually, Bruce could probably answer that question better than I can, which is very funny because I spent 18 years as a sound man.
So there are
Bruce has got a different configuration.
There are two inputs to the ATM Pro Mini. We use one of them where we daisy chain some of these hockey puck things that we were talking about in the very beginning. I always forget the name of it. John?
CM1000 puck mics, they're court reporter microphones.
So we daisy chain those, and then into the other input, it was actually in one of the pictures Alan had. We're using the Rode Go 2 wireless 2-channel system now, where we can actually wire up the demonstrator and one other person if we want to, or use that for a pass-around microphone, which I've had in my mind, but we haven't tried yet. So we use the combination. And the nice thing about the Rode 2 is you can individually control the gains on those two input mics. So you don't have to rely on the fact you're only using one input on the Atem. So that's what we're doing now. As Alan said, our room is not that large, so dealing with the room itself is not that big a deal. But when we went to the Rode 2, actually in the last video, it was amazing how much better the demonstrator sounds over our prior system that we had had.
Yeah, we use the Rode 2 as well. But where we have some problems is getting the Zoom participant's voice into the room. What do you do for that?
That we're just using the TV.
Just using the TV?
Mm-hmm.
And we have not had any feedback issues with that. We were always concerned about that. We do have two TVs at both ends of the room, and we usually only put the sound out of one of them, trying to keep that sound as far away from the other microphones as we can.
Okay.
We do that as well. You also mentioned a pass-around microphone, Bruce. We have consistently found the microphone gets there just as the guy finishes talking.
Yeah, that's probably true. And we find in our small room, the two hockey puck mics pretty much pick up the room quite well. And we're pretty surprised, actually, that you do it that well.
We use 4 of them. We have one of them right up on the lathe so the demonstrator can talk into it as well. And we hardly use any of the other mics anymore.
Yeah, Rode actually has a handheld mic that you can put the wireless piece right into it and act it like a handheld mic. But yeah, we have not actually used that.
We just taped it to a scraper.
Yeah, of course.
You got to move on, I think.
Yes, I do so think. Alan, thank you so much. It was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you, and I'm glad to.
If you guys have other questions for Alan, just put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can't get them answered. We're going to move on to Scott Tipping, to our part of our international audience here. He's from Golden Horseshoe in Hamilton, Ontario, and he's going to share with us their path to hybrid meetings.
Oh, that beautiful picture. Beautiful picture.
Can you make it full? There we go.
Yeah, this is right outside my back door. No, I'm kidding. Good evening, folks. I'm Scott Tipping. I am the communications website officer for the Golden Horseshoe Woodturners Guild. We're located in Ontario, Canada, around the Niagara, Hamilton, Toronto area. We have about 120 members in our guild, and this presentation is going to be a little bit different than the others. We're not experts telling you the best products to use or how you should set things up. This presentation is about our journey and the process that we have followed to start working our way into the hybrid meetings. So if you haven't figured out how to deliver hybrid meetings yet, then this may help provide you with a little focus, or at least to learn what we did and what we could have done better. In the interest of time, I'm going to be reading my script so that I can blast through it as quickly as possible. But if you need to stop me, then please feel free. I'm going to break our presentation down into, we got a second slide here. There we are. Into 4 brief sections, forming our team, the goals for hybrid meetings and some basic principles that we followed, identifying our technology needs, and the analysis that led to our recommended plan. As many of you did, we spent 2 years during COVID meeting via Zoom. We had a couple of paid IRDs. We did our own demos and videos, and it worked fine. During that time, however, our host location changed. And when we polled our members about moving sites, we also polled them about offering hybrid meetings. And at the time, we asked our members if the guild were to develop the ability to live stream meetings from the new location or provide the video recordings of the meetings and then make them available via YouTube, would you see that as an alternative to in-person meetings? And while generally everybody agreed they wanted to meet face-to-face, about 3/4 of the respondents said that they supported the hybrid meetings. Plus, our old analog technology is grossly outdated and starting to be problematic. So at a minimum, we need to update it and hopefully improve that in-person experience. So back in April, we held our first in-person, when we held our first in-person meeting, we advised the members that we were looking into the hybrid meetings and then invited volunteers to serve on the committee. The committee was struck, which now includes me, Mike McLeod, Mike Brazo, John McCauley and Maurice Solar, to develop a plan to bring our hybrid meetings to the Guild. I believe a couple of the guys are with us tonight. I saw John here, and our club president, Keith Robinson, is also here as well. At our meeting, before we even discussed what was needed, one of the members had said that they had already figured out a solution and wanted to show us what they had. And a demo ensued, and it really didn't check off all the marks. Some of the components were good, weren't fully integrated. The solution was designed more for a Probus style meeting and not a wood turning demo. And we decided that rather than take someone else's idea and adapt it, that it was important to start with a needs assessment before looking to the solution. And we also identified that it was important for the entire team to go through the whole process, the learning process from the beginning to the end, so that all team members would be on the same page at the same time. We'd understand what we decided upon and why. We'd be comfortable taking on any role in a meeting if required. And so we regrouped and started over from scratch. And at the same time, of course, we've been attending these meetings and continue to learn from others. So what were our goals and principles? The first meeting, we agreed to some basic principles. Affordable, but not cheap. Keep it simple. We wanted to walk before we could run. A phased approach, if we needed to, was okay. And that the technology had to be adaptable. So some of the key outcomes or goals or deliverables that we established were that the meeting experience should be very similar for everyone, whether you're with us in the room or at home. That step-by-step documentation of the system layout was necessary, and that it had to be dummy-proof so that guys like me can follow it. And that this was not going to be a one-person show. We acknowledged that there needed to be a team of committed individuals available to help, both on a regular basis as well as on a backup basis if needed. We needed sufficient money, and we needed sufficient time to allow to do the research, to do the testing. We wanted our decisions to be educated, vetted, and then hopefully only make them once. We're also realistic though, and recognize that, you know, we may have to make adjustments and tweak as required once we get into the implementation stage. The system we implement had to improve upon the existing audio and video experience, because we've been using the same system for the last 10 years, and it was really important for us to acknowledge that that was an important piece of the puzzle. And the other really interesting piece to this, I thought, was that our meeting recordings had to be made available for reference, our reference library, so that others can continue to learn from our meeting presentations. And we see this as sort of a third spoke to the wheel. The hybrid meetings being the in-persons, folks can appreciate the demonstration. The folks at home viewing in the moment can appreciate the demonstration. And the third spoke to that is that anyone can view it later online for continued learning.
Totally in agreement with that.
So what was the process that we followed, and what are we going to implement? After we regrouped, we first identified what a hybrid meeting meant to us. That was important to do because we were all over the place and on different pages. And so we whiteboarded and brainstormed to identify all the various components that may be needed for us to provide a fully hybrid meeting. By the end of the meeting, we had created component clusters that we asked one or two team members to dig into a little bit more, to research, to consider what may or may not work for us, and then to present back to the team what their recommendations were for us to consider. Now, to be quite frank, this is a very simplified breakdown, but the level of detail was a tad overwhelming because there is a lot to consider. We broke it down basically as follows. Video. This was looking at the cameras that we were going to use. Are they going to be camcorders, webcams, GoPros, cell phones? How many do we need? Where would they be used? Do we want the zoom in functionality or not? What are the cabling needs? But not only that, how are they going to be mounted? Are they on tripods, overhead, towers, booms? What about our lighting? There was obviously lots to consider in this category. And then closely related is the projection of those video images, TV versus projectors. What are the lumens on each? How many do we need? A big TV for the audience, but what about the monitors for the producer or the Zoom host? What about a monitor for the presenter that Alan was talking about earlier, so that they can see what the audience is seeing? If we do a big TV, 65 or 75 inches, how the heck are we going to lift it high enough that the audience is going to be able to see it? What is it going to be mounted on? And then if it's mounted on something, how do we move it? How do we store it? What are the weight requirements? If we're doing multiple cameras, then how do we feed and organize and switch between the video presentations? And what the heck is this ATEM mini that everyone keeps talking about? So again, there was lots to consider. Same for audio, microphones, speakers, sound mixer. What is the need? How's it all going to be integrated together? Can we leverage the church's existing system? We have a membership of about 120 people, and certainly not all attend, but our room is probably a good 35 by 55 feet in dimensions. So we've got a big size room. And then finally, on the computer side, is a laptop good enough? Do we need the portability, or should we build a computer that allows us the capacity to upgrade our components over time, add ports, etc.? What is our Zoom account? Is it sufficient to do what we want to do? Are we recording the Zoom meetings locally or to the cloud? How do they render, and do they render to the quality necessary? We decided we wanted to do it locally to get a better quality production. Is our YouTube account sufficient? What about cables, adjusters, adapters, splitters, all these things? Again, tons and tons and tons to consider. So
let me break in a second, say about recording, because you and I talked about that, and I advised local recording, but I've since learned better. I'm now using cloud recording, and because I'm on a 1080p license through the Zenrite consortium, I get a very good recording at the other end, which was a big surprise to me.
That's a good point. And without that higher licensing, the local rendering is the best quality. So if you're prepared to pay the money for that, then absolutely it's worth it. But we knew we were going to be spending a fair coin on all the other things, and we wanted to temper that just a titch. So because of the volume, because of being overwhelmed, to help us focus our thinking a little bit, we kind of mocked up a proposed room layout. And I know you probably can't see this to any great degree, but this was helpful when talking conceptually, because now everyone was not visualizing the space differently. We were looking at, where are we going to stand? How are we going to mount this item versus that item? Where are we going to position show and tell, or the President's Challenge part of our meetings? How are the cables going to be laid? Do we have long enough extension cords to reach and power the heavy lathe? And we've also done some other graphic images as well about our lathe and the camera positions and stuff. And I think once we did this, it helped to solidify some of our thinking. But it's basic. Lathe, the lathe is on the left-hand side of this image. Producer computers to the right side of the lathe, the big TV to the left, and so on. In the interest of time, and considering that we really technically haven't presented to our executive yet, I'm not going to get into our recommendations about what we're going to buy and so on. And frankly, so much of that is going to be unique to each of the different clubs, your space, your research, your needs, your financial ability, and so on. I'm going to just steer clear. But basically, we pulled together our analysis into a chart like this. This is a very simple representation of the layout we used. And for each of the technology needs, we broke down into maybe half a dozen different subcategories, but like the splitters and the cables or the mounting hooks. But we looked at first at what we currently have, and if it worked, then we didn't need to go any further. And if it didn't, then we considered we could make up to 2 different recommendations for the committee to look at, maybe a scenario 1 and 2. We discussed the pros and cons of each of it. We listed where we could buy them from if that information had been identified, and then some high-low cost estimates. Now, having said that, when we do go to the membership, we will be inviting them to make donations of items if they're available and so on. And we're also going to consider where we can buy things in a more cost-effective way. So when researching, we obviously attended the open forum meetings to learn more, but we also watched the myriad of videos produced or posted by John. Thank you very much. We consulted with experts in the field. We went to Henry's for our video equipment, other computer stores. We went to Long and McQuaid for audio. We emailed our peers and some of the folks who attend these meetings. We even had a Zoom demo with Bert Delisle from the Edmonton Woodturners, who showed us his setup and the merits of the Atem Mini Pro. And so just to give you perspective, this is the basic timeline that we followed. We had a little stumble at the beginning, as I mentioned, that slowed us down, but we didn't necessarily take our time. There's advantages to working as a committee, like being able to get the wisdom of the group and spreading out the workload and so on, but it can also take a little bit longer, especially when everyone has to be informed or decisions have to be made collectively. The nice thing is we knew that we had the summer off and we to work on this, and we hope to roll it out fall. Lessons learned, this is definitely a journey, and the level of detail and learning can be crippling and overwhelming. You can find yourself in a paralysis by analysis situation quite easily. So stay focused, do the research, have a plan, and then implement. For us, our next steps include going to the executive to approve our proposal, maybe strategize a little bit on how we might want to finance the project. That's on August 24th, so just next week. Then we have to poll our members because our bylaws require a 2/3 approval to spend more than $1,000. So we may also solicit them for donations. And if we get their go ahead, we'll start buying our components, doing the testing at home, start the phase in of our technology for our live meetings, and then maybe a little bit at a time, maybe all at once. We haven't really determined that yet, but most importantly, we'll take time to step back, reassess when it's all done, and then determine if it's working and if there's anything that we can do better. So finally, in summary, there is a lot to consider. There is a lot to learn, not just about the individual pieces, but more importantly, how they all work together. And frankly, I'm not sure that I'm confident with that yet. I confess that's true, but I like to think I know what I'm doing, but I don't. Decide up front what you're trying to achieve and what it's going to look like. Visualize the meeting, discuss what will happen under certain circumstances, listen and learn from others, and then search out the tools to make it happen. So thank you for your time. I'm sure my clock says I'm pretty darn close to the limit, but if you have any questions,
thanks, Scott. We appreciate that a lot. And it's great to hear someone who's so process focused. It's a different perspective. Do we have questions for Scott? Just use the raise hand and
or just jump.
Or jump in, I guess, at this point.
I have to say, I'm very impressed by your planning process. It's the kind of thing you expect from well-educated Canadians. We don't get that kind of education here very easily.
I think people who work in processes do, but the one thing I didn't see in here, and the one thing, was our learning, is, there is the kind of, as Rick Baker talked about, for people working on it, you're going to need to have the people committed to do this actually, and to work on this every month or whatever your meeting period is, and have enough people volunteer to keep up with that. And that was one of our learnings, is you can't do this with 1 or 2 people. You need a group that's willing to work on this all the time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's move on.
Just make sure there's no more questions in the room. Are there any?
I didn't see any.
I didn't see any. Okay, we're good. Thanks.
Steve, I guess you have got more than 15 minutes, and let's see what you're doing in Raleigh.
All right.
Or Durham, I guess. They're not the same.
Well, no, the club's in Raleigh. I live in Durham.
Okay.
And I just have to, I will apologize for my Zoom camera right now, because I'm not on a porch at a mountain house on an unlit porch, and it's getting dark. So, I am the president of the Woodturners Guild of North Carolina, and so just a little background. We are about 110 members. We meet at the NC State University Craft Center in a classroom that has 2 columns. It's 50 feet long, 20 feet wide. So it has some dimensional challenges. Pre-COVID, we were meeting monthly with 40 to 50 members attending each meeting. And typically our meetings were 2.5 hours, 15 minutes for business, 90 minutes for the demonstration. And we had about 45 minutes for social time and show and tell within the meetings. During COVID, we switched to 2 meetings per month. all on Zoom, both on Zoom. We had a membership meeting with a demo that was either a paid member, paid IRD, or a member presented. And then we added a second meeting, which was strictly a show. We moved the show and tell out of the first meeting, and we just, in order to allow some more interaction, we have a separate show and tell meeting where members submit up to 2 photos of 2 pieces each month. We put those in a Facebook album and then present that album and let each member talk about it at a separate meeting. And that's been one of our successes, and we're continuing with that show and tell meeting even when we move back to live meetings. It's been very well received.
I've heard that from other clubs who've done the same thing as well, that two meeting format is becoming increasingly common.
Yeah, people love to talk about their work. So, and before we had about 15 minutes to show 30 or 40 pieces, and now we have 2 hours. So it has there's been a really great interchange at those meetings. So all our meetings during COVID were on Zoom, obviously, and one of the things we learned is we opened the Zoom connection 30 minutes before the meeting started, just for social time during the meeting, and that has also been very well received. And people log in usually, 20 minutes before the meeting. About 2/3 of the participants are there on the Zoom calls. So today we're continuing with 2 meetings per month. We're going to have 1 live hybrid meeting and 1 Zoom only meeting. So if we have a live demonstration at the craft center as our membership meeting, then we'll do our show and tell will be a Zoom only meeting. And if we have a paid IRD, which is just going to be a Zoom meeting, then we'll have a live show and tell. And we do that somewhat for cost, just because we have to pay the university for the use of the room. So we only want to do that one night a month.
Are you set up permanently there, or do you have to move your stuff in and set it up?
Well, it's a craft center, so they actually have a wood shop, so that we actually use their lathe, which is we just roll into the classroom. We have donated the TV and the projector to the university. Our cameras, we have 1 camera mounted in the ceiling, which is permanently set up, and some of the wiring in the ceiling is permanently set up, and then some of it is we have to take down. I'll show you when I show you the picture of the setup. And we had our first hybrid meeting last month in July, which was a live demo by one of our members. So our first hybrid meeting, as I said, the room is long and narrow. We have 2 cameras. One is tripod mounted, and the other's, and that's on the tailstock end of the lathe. And then we have one overhead that is fixed, that has a remote control zoom on it, that shows the overhead view right at the headstock. For displays, we have 1 70-inch HD TV and 1 HD projector with a 72-inch screen. At some point, we'll probably add a second TV. The projector is a carryover from what we had before. For the first meeting, we used an Atem Mini Pro. The video feed to the room, to the TV and the projector, was from Zoom. So we used the Zoom feed to feed those 2 monitors. And then for audio, we use the Rode wireless microphones for Zoom. For the room, it's small enough that the people can hear without any amplification. And the demo included a video presentation by the demonstrator of part of the demonstration. So we had to have the capability of adding a video presentation to both the Zoom feed and the in-room presentation. So that added some challenges to it. So the results of this first meeting, we had about 40 participants. It was about 50-50 live and Zoom. The Zoom feed worked well. The people on Zoom got a good presentation. Using the Zoom feed for the room video resulted in lower resolution for the live audience on the monitors in the room, and that's because Zoom doesn't have HD resolution. So that was a problem, and particularly because it's because of the shape of the room. Our monitors are so big that when you don't have good resolution on your monitors, particularly the projector, it wasn't bad, but I wasn't happy with the image. And then we had issues with latency for the live audience, particularly when we were trying to show the video, the demonstrator's video. I wrote Atem macros for picture-in-picture for the two cameras and found it very easy to do. And you can, and I'll show you that when we get back into it. But due to the challenges with the latency and the resolution in the room, we decided to upgrade to the Atem Mini Extreme from the Atem Mini Pro. And so the advantage of the Atem Mini Extreme are there are two HDMI outputs. One, and the reason we didn't use the HDMI output from the Atem for the room, because I wanted the multi-view capacity, and I'll show you a slide of that. I think it's critical to manage these presentations. You have to have multi-view because you can see, particularly if you're programming picture-in-a-picture, that you can set that up and see what's coming before you actually cut it into your feed. And then, so with the two HDMI outputs, one is for multi-view, one is for the program feed to the room displays. And that also, by doing that, it also solved the problem of getting the audio from the video presentation by a demonstrator. That actually fed right into the TV by doing it that way. The Atem, the Extreme also has programmable keys for picture-in-a-picture macro, so you can just hit it. You can program the macros right into the board. It also has what's called super source for video management. Again, it allows you to control your feed again with picture-in-a-picture. While the demonstrator this past month, he was doing, he had a PowerPoint presentation, and we were able to put his, superimpose his view while he was running through PowerPoint. But it's just another way for video management, and it also has a headphone jack, which can be used to support your audio efforts. So this is a picture of the room we're in, and you can see we have one tripod-mounted camera. You can see the image coming from the projector on the left side there, and there's the TV over on the right. But if you look at these computers here in front, so the computer on the left is a laptop that is feeding into an HDMI input into the Atem for the video presentation. The small screen just to the right of that with the little squares on there, that is the Atem control software, which allows you, it's a really handy thing to have open because it allows you to, if you want to change some picture-in-a-picture settings or those types of things, it allows you on the fly, you can do that. It's really pretty easy to use and very powerful. The middle laptop, the Microsoft Surface, is the program, and that's actually the Zoom feed that's coming out of that. And the final monitor on the right above the Atem is a portable monitor, and that's coming out of the Atem. That's the Atem. That's the multi-view coming out of the Atem. And I just built a little stand for it, so it sits over all the wires coming out of the out of it. And this is a great. I bought it on Amazon. It's the company. It's LaPro, but it's just an LCD or an LED monitor. It's about the size of it's an oversized tablet size is all it is, but it's a 1/4 inch thick, and it's a great way. It's easy to carry around, and it's a great little thing. And I will say that the little screen that's between the two laptops is it's a tablet that is serving as a second screen for the Microsoft Surface laptop, and that's using an application that's called Super Display. It's just you don't need to do much on it, but it allows you. It adds a second screen on there. So that's the setup. You can see the tripod-mounted camera, and you can just see the overhead. There's a camera overhead on the lathe, just above the lathe. But that multi-view that's on that. So. And again, without getting too far into this, you can program what that view looks like. So on this, I have 3 inputs. I have camera 1, which is the tripod, camera 2, which is the overhead, and the input 3 is the laptop that's over on the left side there. If you have more cameras, you can show. And then the upper image on the upper left is the preview. So if you're manipulating picture in a picture, you can get that all set up before you hit the button to cut it in. And the image on the right side is the program. That's what's going out to Zoom.
Now, is that the extreme there that it has 8 inputs? Is that right?
It has 8 inputs, yes.
Yeah.
That's a lot of buttons.
Yeah. I personally don't like picture in picture. I prefer picture beside picture. So that's
well, it is that's what you're when you do the programming. It's not you're splitting the screen into 2 camera inputs. So it's
a lot better.
Yeah. It's definitely better, and because you can crop the images so you can get just the part of the image that you want, and that's particularly useful with the overhead camera because it's giving you a rectangular image, but you don't need a rectangular image. You can mask the sides of it in order to get 2 side-by-side images up on the screen. And I don't have that shown here, but it's very easy, very, very easy to do with the macros and the Atem.
We just do that with spotlights, so that's even easier. But that's very sophisticated what you got there.
Right. Again, this is a close-up of multi-view, and the reason I'm doing it is a powerful thing. And the other thing, you'll see that right there in the middle, you have all your audio inputs coming in. So again, when you're feeding we're showing a video from that laptop that comes in, but you can manipulate all your audio coming in there. The Atem has audio controls on it, so you can mask it. And then the super display controls are you can fill in those other bottom ones. So and as was mentioned earlier, every cable we have on both ends of the cable says where it starts and where it ends. So you can see the cable goes into the Atem and it goes into this port. So yeah, the label maker, I am colorblind, so color coding would not work. But every cable we have, without exception, has a label on both ends that says what device it plugs into and which port it goes into.
So you only have in the kit the cables you need. You don't have a whole lot of extra cables there for just in case.
I have in a kit all the cables I need, and I have another bin that has the just in case cables.
Okay. Because they're not labeled.
Because they're not labeled. All right, so I'm not going to get into a whole lot on this because I think this is very similar to what people have seen before. The difference is that there's 2 HDMI outputs on the Extreme, and one of them goes to the room, and the other one goes to multi-view. And with that, I mean, most of the other the rest of this diagram is pretty much what's been presented. Very similar to what other people are doing. And again, just highlighting the fact that if you're using an HDMI splitter, it has to be a powered HDMI splitter. But
Steve, while you have this up though, a number of us have had trouble with the audio on videos from the remote computer getting fed into Atem. You apparently have solved this somehow. So is it because you've just plugged this second computer directly into the Atem?
Right. So we have the laptop for the demo is coming into the Atem, but what solved it and so both the first 2 times we had hybrid meetings, both demonstrators had videos. The first time we could not make it work with the Mini Pro. We could not get the audio to come out of the TVs in the room. The people on Zoom could hear it, and the way we ended up feeding it to the room was we had a laptop and put a microphone next to it and fed it that way from the Zoom connection, which was the only way we could do it. But by doing this, what we have with the Extreme, since the room is now fed by the program coming out from the Atem, because it has 2 HDMI outs on it now, it solved that problem entirely. So the video comes right through the Atem because it's essentially the same program that's going to Zoom. And I don't know why it doesn't work without it, but we could not get it to work. It did not work. Having it come through the Zoom feed when we were feeding the program to Zoom.
All right, thank you, because I know a number of us have had the same problem with the ATM.
And I said, we did it with the microphone. We also, at some point, if that didn't work, we were just going to take a 3.5 millimeter jack and go directly from an output, the headphone jack from the laptop into the speakers. But that was our fallback on this one. But the Extreme did solve that problem.
What does the Extreme cost, Steve?
Just under $1,000.
So the basic mini is 300, the Mini Pro is 500, and this is 1,000. Is that right?
That's right. And I have, if anybody's interested, I have a brand new Atem Mini Pro for sale for $350. I'm serious. Just contact me. We figured we'd just offer it as a discount to somebody that's been used twice. So we're fortunate that we had enough money to do this. We didn't spend a lot of money on workshops over COVID, and our treasury had enough money in it to make it.
Steve, question for you. Would you kind of suggest that the clubs go ahead and go to that level of ATEM rather than making the mistake of going cheap and then having to buy one, then having to buy a second one, and having to buy the third one? I did that with lathes. I hate to do it with this type of equipment.
I am happy. Again, we've used this one time. I think it's a powerful, if you have people that are going to use the power of this piece of equipment, I would suggest you do it. But the Pro will work if you're not doing stuff like showing videos, that type of thing, and you don't need really large monitors in your room where you need the higher resolution. But to me, having the ability to output to the room right from the ATEM and not go through Zoom was a big advantage, and also to retain multi-view. Those two things were I find to be important, because I'm managing maybe at a higher level than some are. If you're going to keep it simple, maybe I've made it too complicated, but to me, it's important to be able to use the dual, either as what I call picture-in-a-picture, but really the dual images on the screens, or maybe even three. So Dennis, I can't really say. I mean, if you have the money, I would go with the Extreme rather than the Pro. But the Pro, certainly there's so many people using it. It works. It can work. It just didn't work as well in our application.
My issue with it is how do I then bring other people in? It's already a formidable learning curve for a new guy, and I have to bring in new guys because I know I'm not going to be here all that long.
Right. Now, that's you'll see when I get to my yes.
Okay, go for it. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So lessons learned. As I said, the additional HDMI output on the Atem Extreme really solved the problem with resolution. It solved the problem with latency, and it allowed us to show videos. And that's going to be really also very important when we do our show and tell meetings, where we have both. We're going to have some people coming in we're going to be showing stuff from Facebook and or from a photo gallery. Actually, we may just. I won't get into the specifics, but you can actually load those images right into the ATEM using the ATEM software.
Does it also record? Does the Extreme record?
Yes, it does. At full resolution, it'll record what's going out on the program.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get all the Zoom input back into it. So that's the downside of that recording. But you'll have a clean recording of the demo. Having the Atem control software open and accessible during the meetings is useful. If you, and again, it's not that complicated. I am not a computer person. I'm an engineer, a retired engineer. I'm not afraid of technology, but I knew nothing about this before I started 6 months ago on this journey. So the multi-view display, I think, is essential for managing your video. However you do it, I think that if you can get much better video and your audio can be controlled using the multi-view. So I think that's important to do. You can customize your multi-view display using the Atem software. The Extreme, the programmable keys on the Extreme allow very easy control of picture in a picture or picture with a picture. And learning the Atem control software is worth the effort. And there's great, I mean, YouTube, anything you need to know about running that unit is on YouTube. So I wouldn't hesitate to do it. Our next steps is we need to bring Zoom, the audio from the Zoom participants into the room. I think we have a plan for it. This past meeting, I have Aeropex bone conduction headset that I just listened to the Zoom meeting while I was running the meeting, and allowed me to, since I don't go in your ear, they allowed me to hear questions coming from Zoom, which I then relayed to the demonstrator. Again, this is only our second time doing this, but we're working on bringing audio from the Zoom participants into the room. We may add an additional monitor in the room for the Zoom gallery view. We're going to continue to explore the Atem video programming options, and we need to train additional folks on the use of it and to prepare an operating manual. John, because I hear you. Right now, I am the only one that knows how to do it. So, and that is not a good situation.
And what I found when I made an operating manual was within one meeting, I had changed the configuration and the manual was meaningless.
Thank you, Steve. Can we kill the share here?
Yeah.
For those who are afraid of the ATM Mini Pro, it is not that you can't show a video with sound through the ATEM. You can't. The problem is when you hook up a second computer and try and feed it in, that you run into issues. So the way we have solved it using the ATEM that we have is to simply make sure we download the video onto the main computer, and then it works fine. The problem is you get the demonstrator comes in with his computer and says, show this video, and then you suddenly have it in the wrong place or you can't get it fast enough. But don't let me talk you out of the better system. The other system does have some advantages, but don't think you can't show a video on the ATEM Mini Pro. You can. So do we have any other questions for Steve, who came in right on time here and showing the skill of the moderator, obviously.
Terrific presentation. Well, I think all three presentations tonight were absolutely terrific. First rate.
They were very great. First rate.
Before we wrap, I'm looking at a gallery view here on a second panel. I know it's not you've got to do that yourself if you're going to do it. How much interest is there in a separate evening on Zoom menus and Zoom moderation techniques? Could I have just wave your hands if you would be interested in attending that? Okay, it looks like enough interest for us to schedule that. I'm saying about a half interest, so we will schedule that probably within a couple weeks.
Rick, do you have another question? I see your hand up.
Comment. I'm listening to you guys. I have overhead sound in my shop here, distributed sound, and all I did was plug in the output of my laptop into that system, and that's how I've listened to this whole thing. And my audio coming from a hockey puck. Okay, so both of them are living in the same room, no problem. Very good sound both ways.
All right, thank you.
I think we need to find somebody who really knows audio to give us a ground zero tutorial and build up to understanding what Rick just said.
Alan might be that guy.
Well, he might be. Maybe you can get him to do it. Because I find audio is what bewilders me. And all of my struggles are with audio. Video, it seems to be no problem.
No, Alan told me keep all our microphones at the same level, which was a whole new thought to me. And yeah, he knows.
Frankly, the biggest difficulty with audio is that if you want to talk with a professional audio person, somebody who does things like concerts or front of house events, which is some of the stuff that I did, or working with AV equipment and audio production feeds, and then computer audio and some of the nuances that are there. They are literally three different disciplines that are all called the same, they're all called audio, but they are they're potentially very, very different skill sets and experience.
Well, maybe you would give us a 20-minute primer on that sometime soon.
Okay, I'll look into some ideas on there.
Okay, and we can also get the same thing from the fellow from Susquehanna, Tim Starlipper. He, like a lot of you guys, knows too much, though. It's hard to get him down to explain it so I can understand it.
All right, I think we have exhausted our time to the minute, John, and we'll do this again next month.
Let's just see if there's anybody with a burning desire to say anything. This is your last moment. Thank you very much, all of you, for your keen participation. Feel free to recommend other people to join our mailing list. I will send out the videos as soon as I get them cleaned up and posted. And any chat, I'll also put the chat attached to the Fallout video email. So when I send out an email, I try not to send you too many emails, but that means some of them have a ton of information in them.
John, I forwarded by email the diagram from Alan so that you can send that out in that email. So we're going to have those symbols and make their own diagrams.
Yeah, and we'll have these videos posted from today. We'll post, we'll post the whole meeting as well as we'll post each presenter as a separate.
John, it would really be nice to get the slide deck that Scott Tipping used. I thought that process work was well done.
If it's okay with Scott, I can forward it to you. I have it here.
I would appreciate that if he would.
If it's okay with you, I'll put it out to everybody as part of the package that goes out. It's no problem.
And John, this is Steve. I sent you a PDF of my presentation. You're welcome to send that out.
I'll do the same thing with that. I'll get them posted on the AW site as an archive, and I'll get them sent out with links or in some way that you guys can get them. It might be more than one email this week. There's going to be an awful ton of stuff, and it'll be a few days before I get it together. But anything you want to put in that package, get it to me, and out it'll go. Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Good night.